Leaving Wild Goose early this afternoon to go to Milwaukee for the Republican convention. I know they haven't invited us, but a bunch of multi-faith leaders in Milwaukee and around the country are having an event, a service tomorrow night on the eve of the convention to speak our faith into the conversation. That's what we're doing. So I want to ask us today how we can do that. Let me start with a bit of an exercise. You're going to hear from me, as you always do, biblical texts and religious language and words that I guarantee will trigger in this tent, among all of us, feelings of disappointment, feelings of even betrayal, feelings of even assault, how we have felt assaulted by these words. Words you're going to hear today, words they're going to hear in Milwaukee. Even the words and our language for many of us are very difficult to hear. We're struggling with how to bring those words into this moment because we struggle ourselves with those words. Now, we could go around the room and hear very moving, painful stories about how the words of faith have felt so betraying and assaulting to many of us, even sitting here, even folks who've been in the church, around the church, still adjacent to it. There's not time to do all that, but I want to acknowledge the reality of the pain and the betrayal by taking a moment of silence to be quiet and to respect and recognize how deeply hurt we are by the words of religion. Let's do that. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. The Republican convention isn't going to be changed by any kind of politics. Who knows? There may be some people at the convention there who are or trying to be people of faith, and they may listen to what some of us have to say, and they may not. Likely not. But I want to say the Democrats have a hard time, to be honest, a hard time talking about faith, even ethics, even morality. They have a hard time doing that. There is a kind of secular fundamentalism that's as real as religious fundamentalism that has entered the left and the Democratic Party, so they will have a hard time speaking the language of faith. Democrats will, in these next several months. So I think we have to do that. We have to do that and help the conversation by speaking the language of faith, which Democrats are going to be pretty much unable to do. There are exceptions. Friends of mine, Democratic leaders, who are people of faith, but even they say it's hard for them to speak the language of faith. If we don't speak the language of faith in these next several months, the politics may well do us in. Now, we could talk about, I've often talked about, let's call it the perfect storm of how politics are leading us to an authoritarian moment in this country. There's all kind of reasons why. But to me, it's deeper. I have never felt, I'm just saying to you, I have never felt evil encroaching in on an election. Never before, like I'm feeling right now. Evil is encroaching on this election. Every nation has its better angels and worse demons. Donald Trump is not just the master of grievance. He's the master of evoking our worst demons as a nation. It's that deep. And everybody wants me to tell them what's going to happen. I have no idea. I don't know how grievance and demons will come out numbers-wise in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona. That's where I'm working this next fall. I can't tell you how the numbers will come out, but there will be a faith factor in this election, a faith factor that could be decisive. So I think our job, people who come to Wild Goose, is to try to make that faith factor better. The reason, as we said in a panel yesterday, white Christian nationalism is not new. It's the old dominionist theology. There were papal bulls that said it's okay to wipe out indigenous people and enslave a whole African population. It's okay religiously. We've said that from the start. That racial hierarchy of our founding is still deeply embedded, and because we are possibly closer to a genuine multiracial democracy than ever before in our history, first one in the world, and because of that, white supremacy is making its final battle. And they're organized, much more than we're organized. They've already vetted people to take over the civil service jobs that will be wiped away this next administration. They're already mobilized with voter intimidation at polling places, voter suppression, voter subversion. They're organized much more. They've been doing it for decades. They're very organized. Democrats are not organized. So how do we, people like us, even people in this tent, how do we make the faith factor an element in this election? First, we have to call these things by what they are. This isn't just a threat to democracy. White Christian nationalism is literally an idolatry. Yes? By the definition of the word, it's an idolatry. Then the Donald Trump campaign isn't just bad for vulnerable people, it is literally anti-Christ. And that has to be named. And where? In places where those words mean something. Now, you all have a variety of relationships and tension in your relationships with white churches. Am I right? Okay. If we just are controlled by our hurt and disappointment and tensions in these next months, it will be our kind of not really going to those venues and places to speak the words of faith. We're working hard at polling places. If you want to work as a poll chaplain, we're in the most perilous polling places, particularly minority, low-income voters, and I can get you involved. Any state you want to get involved in, or by the phone, anywhere at all. We've got to fight for voter protection in key states, and that's what we're doing. Barbara Williams-Skinner and I and Adam Taylor are doing Faith United to Save Democracy. This session was supposedly about this book. It's all in the book, Faith United, faiths plural, United to Save Democracy. We are multi-faith, multiracial, and multi-generational. We've got Steph Curry doing videos for us to reach kids on the street. So if you want to get involved in that, that's a clear venue. But the other venue is going to be churches. Churches that you're struggling with, in tension with, maybe have left. We've got to take the faith factor in the churches. And this book, I'm not going to go through them, but it's 6 iconic biblical texts. These are texts that you know. You've heard preached all over Wild Goose. I've lived with them for years, but I went back to them, and I did all the commentaries I could find historically about these 6 texts. And you should all read Howard Thurman's book on the parables. Maybe the best thing out there on the parables, Howard Thurman. But I try to reframe and refresh these texts and how to take them back to the places where people say they believe in these texts. So we are going to try and have, the book is sparking conversations, and I want to do that today, hear from you. Conversations around the country. We're going back to all these states, and I want to see a conversation in churches about what these texts mean. We can't allow people to disregard and ignore these texts. All the noise around us, all the noise. Genesis 1:26, first chapter, first book of the Bible. Imagine all the noise surrounding you. It says, then God said, shut up, noise. Then God said. That text is saying any attempt to suppress a vote because of someone's skin color or any other reason is nothing less than an assault on Imago Dei, an assault, an attack on the image of God. That language has to be brought into our churches because you have white Christians, and not just white evangelicals, white mainline churches, white Catholics, white Christians, all voted in a majority for Donald Trump twice. Not just the evangelicals were the worst, but white Christians last time all voted in majority for Donald Trump. All your denominations. So that text has to be brought into the conversation. Or when Jesus says, you'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free, I wrestled with that and realized something I hadn't even known before. That the opposite of truth, says Jesus, is not lies, it's captivity. The truth will make you free. If you don't know the truth, you are captive. So we are confronting all kind of people in our white churches, and some of them, as you know, even if you disagree with them, some of them are good people, but they are utterly captive. Captive. So how do we try not just to win elections, but set the captive free? How do we try to set our people free? Yes. It's easy for us to stay. In fact, when Trump won, in my opinion, when Trump won and the liberal left had no access to anything at all, in Washington, White House, nobody got invited to Christmas parties at the White House. It was a total exile for progressives, liberals, left. And what too often we did is we just began to focus on attacking each other, ourselves. Many organizations imploded from within because of attacks. And so when you can't speak outside, you speak within and just go after each other. We got to stop doing that. We got to stop doing that. And we got to draw our attention to our faith and what it says, even if we struggle with those institutions ourselves. We got to draw attention to faith, what we think faith really is. And so we have to have, in an election, which is a test of democracy, it is also a test of faith. We got to make that test of faith clear in venues where faith is being talked about. It's also a test of the next generation who are watching us. They're watching us. They're seeing if people of faith stand up, speak out, or sit down and be silent. And depending on what we do, they'll decide if they're ever going to come back to faith communities, a new generation. So it is a hard road to go to a place like Milwaukee and try to speak faith in that environment. I have no idea but even for all of us, we can't keep arguing about candidates. We can have our opinions, but that's going to be a done deal. We can't control all that. What we have is a decision going to be made in early voting and on election day, a decision that the French just figured out. last week. They knew this was a decision to vote for the Vichy regime in France in the 1930s that supported Hitler and the Nazis. They figured it out this week. And they said, we're not going to do that. We're going to stop that. We're going to stop them from winning. This decision, and my dear friends, I have a lot of conversation every day with young people, and some of them have said, let's just blow this thing off, and 4 years we'll try again. There won't be a try again in 4 years. But we have to tell young people that we totally agree with their radical critique of democracy, because many are saying, what does it mean for me? Almost nothing. They're right. How do we say to them, we're not just trying to get you to vote, because Trump's worse. We're trying to say, if we can win this election, we will commit to transforming democracy in this country in all the ways you want to see it happen. Yes. We have to commit to that for them to get their confidence in their vote. You can't transform democracy if you don't save it. That's right. And now we're into saving it in order to transform it. But we've got to commit to the democracy. We can't go back to democracy as usual under Biden or even Obama. It wasn't enough. And for a whole lot of young people and people on the bottom, you heard the music last night, democracy means almost nothing for marginal people in this country the way it's practiced now. And we got to be committed to that changing if we win this battle for the elect. Does that make sense?
Yes.
All right. So this book sparks conversations. I've done way too many sermons with way too many amens. But I want to give us a few moments here. I like, before Ken sings the song that speaks to the book so powerfully, I want to hear from you, questions, comments. What do we do? You've heard all the texts this weekend. You've heard Matthew 25, where the economics of Jesus turned the politics of Washington upside down. Upside down. That's what we have to do. He doesn't say, blessed are the peace lovers or peace keepers. He says peacemakers, which means those who go right into the conflicts. Peacemaking is active, risky conflict resolution. And those who do that, he says, will be called the children of God. So the texts are clear, and the best thing I know right now to go after this authoritarian movement is the text. The text. So we can do politics all day. We can argue politics all day. We can talk about our opinions, and the Democrats will do everything they can. They won't talk about faith in the way that somebody has to, and that's us. So how do we, despite all of our struggles with our religious traditions, which are real and painful, how do we take the faith factor into these next several weeks and months in our churches, in our social media, in our town meetings with your family and friends over dinner? How do we insist that what we say faith means is the debate, the conversation? Some of us are going to challenge Franklin Graham and all the rest to debates this fall. We're going to challenge them, and they won't do it. They won't do it. Maybe we can appeal to their male egos and get them to do it, but they probably won't do it. And then we'll say they're cowards. All that's good, but where do we take this? What venues to make the faith factor a factor in this election? That's what this book is all about. How the faith factor must be a factor in this election. So questions. Try not to do sermons, but questions. And do we have a mic? Here we go. Mr. Mike. Why don't you want to come down here? Would that be easier? And then we're going to just talk for a bit and then have Ken sing us home.
Can you help us with the question about how to counter the pro-life argument within churches that seems to be the single issue most people rally around?
How to counter the pro-life argument. The Republicans, you all know, are not pro-life. I'm for a consistent ethic of life. They're not, okay? We've laid out time and time again how to support women in dangerous, difficult, traumatic situations, healthcare, nutrition, all kind of support would radically reduce the number of abortions in America, which many of us think is a good thing. But to penalize and attack and marginalize and punish women is something completely contrary to our gospel. But I do think, I'll just say, I'm going to be controversial, the Democrats and the left need to learn to talk about abortion in a different way. The extremes are controlling the conversation on all sides. And we got to get to a place where most Americans really are, which is trying to support women and reduce abortion, at the same time not penalize and make terrible decisions illegal and punish them for that. But we're having a bad conversation in America on abortion on both sides, and that's going to hurt us in this election. I'm being frank here. We got to talk about it in different ways than we have before. Other questions, please.
We've recently watched the video that Diana Butler Bass did with Mr. Shriver on dignity, and I wonder if you would comment on how that might improve the dialogue as we go forward in the next 4 months.
Yeah, Diane's a great friend. We talk almost all the time. By the way, I'll just say here, we're having a summit at Georgetown, September 19 and 20, a national summit on faith and democracy. And we're going to be releasing a statement, and I mention that because Diane's going to be part of that. Jamar Tisby, Christian Dumais, lots of good folks. We're releasing a statement called Christians for Democracy. A group of scholars has worked on this for 8 months. We'll release it September 19th at Georgetown. You're all welcome to come. It'll be a statement hopefully people can use, pastors in congregations, wherever they are, again saying why this issue is theological, not just political. The whole thing I'm trying to say today, this must become a theological issue and not just a political issue. And this statement with all these great scholars, they're Catholic scholars, mainline, black church, even some evangelical. And it's going to say this is theological, what it means for Christian faith to support democracy. She'll be a part of that conversation in Washington, September 19th and 20th at Georgetown. More is coming out about that. But she's an ally in all of this. And watch that. Dignity is the Genesis 1:26 question. That's the image of God question. That's what she's saying. And we're all saying, yes, please.
In North Carolina, and I suspect in some of the other battleground states, the election will be won or lost by the rural vote. And by the rural vote, we have in our state many rural communities that are very pro-Republican, pro-Trump. How can, or is there a strategy for mobilizing the rural church to hear the kind of messaging you're talking about? Because if we don't reach into those communities, North Carolina will
You're exactly right.
not win.
So we have Faith United to say democracy is in North Carolina. And we're in not just, Raleigh-Durham and Duke. We're all over the state. And I'm coming back to North Carolina for 4 or 5 days, and we're going to rural areas as well. We're going to have town meetings in rural areas in North Carolina. I've been in North Carolina where in churches where people are packing when they come into church. And you're preaching to a congregation carrying guns, and you're not quite sure what the amen will be or not, So you're exactly right. We can't just stay in urban areas. That's why we're going to rural Wisconsin. We've been to Milwaukee, but Green Bay, and not just Detroit, but we've been to Grand Rapids, also West Michigan. Our leads, they're black clergy leads in all these states, but rabbis are involved, imams are involved, and so we're going to be in those rural areas. Again, if you want to know more about your state, go to Faiths United to Save Democracy, and particularly North Carolina. I'd love to hear from any of you where you think we should go this fall in North Carolina. You're exactly right, rural areas. And again, not to have a political conversation, but to say, what does our faith mean? If we have common ground at all, it's on what we say about faith. If you have a different idea of what Jesus meant in the Good Samaritan parable, let's have a conversation. Jesus said, his example, I often say, the lawyer who came to Jesus, he asked the most important question for a democracy: who is my neighbor? And I often say he was a Washington lawyer, because I know that tone of voice. And Jesus says, your neighbor is the Samaritan. He's the example, the one who's othered by your last speaker here, reiterated to me, the man alongside the road was Jewish. And she told me he was Jewish. So an other to him, Samaritan, helped one other to him. That was Jesus' example of how to be a neighbor. So I want to have that conversation or debate about the Good Samaritan in churches. What did Jesus mean? If you say you care about what Jesus meant, then you got to have a conversation about it. And I'm going to be blunt here. I'm going to a big meeting of a lot of black pastors next week. I think black churches should say to all their sister white churches, most of them have sister white churches, and I think black pastors should go to their sister white churches and say, we're going to talk about the election this fall, about what faith means. We're going to have that conversation, and if you won't have it, we're not going to send you our choir to sing in February. We've got to have that conversation in places of faith. Yes.
Okay, I have two questions. One regarding the question earlier about abortion. You said, the Democrats need to come back with a different conversation about abortion. I want to hear more about how would you do that? That's one question. And the second is, I'm wondering if there will or can be a backlash from liberals and Democrats when you try to bring faith into the conversation, because that's what the right has done that is toxic.
Backlash from liberals? I can't quite hear from the mic there.
Baby, can we expect, or how do we address a potential backlash from our own kind when we try to bring in faith, because faith has been an abusive way of addressing, politics on the right?
Yeah, I understand the conversation. I'm very weary of it. Frederick Douglass was a Christian, and he said so. We have two stories of Christianity in America. One is the one we're all against, but Dr. King wouldn't have had a civil rights movement without the black churches. The black churches were the animating core of the civil rights movement. So we have a whole history in this country from the beginning of those who challenged the founding dominionist theology of the founding of this nation. It goes way back. And Brittany Packnett was at Georgetown recently, a young black African-American activist. I met her at Ferguson. And my student says, where do you find your hope? Where's the hope? And she said, you're asking if I can have hope? Not to have hope would be to betray my ancestors. My ancestors, my great-grandmother who held 3 generations together during slavery. We have that tradition too. So I'm not going to give the right, the far right, the worst definition of religion as what it really is. And people on the left who say that, bad religion, the answer to bad religion is not no religion. There are days when I feel that, to be honest. The answer to bad religion is better religion, is good faith. And we have a whole history of that in our nation and in this movement. And so those on the left who don't want to talk about it, I'm sorry they don't, and they're making a mistake. It's part of our history. It's not just a bad part of our history. It's a good part of our history, too. And that battle is one I've been involved in for 50 years, fighting bad religion with better faith. So there are people on the left who say, don't say religion because it's all bad. I say, no, you're wrong. It's not all bad. And here we go with what faith is supposed to mean. And if we concede religion to the right, if we concede it to them, we're going to lose not just this fall, we're going to lose to an authoritarian movement. We can't concede religion to the right. We've got to take it ourselves, speak ourselves. Even David Brooks, in the column I read just yesterday, he actually said, Brooks, he said, we're in trouble, and the future of this country will probably, David Brooks, I haven't talked to him about this yet, but he said it yesterday, solved by progressive Christians who show a real social gospel. David Brooks said, that's what Sojourners have been doing for years. We're all doing that. Progressive Christians who show a social gospel, in it, not instead of a personal gospel, but also alongside integral at the core. That's our future. And I once said in a book, God's Politics, the right gets it wrong, and the left doesn't get it. The left still doesn't get it. The right's got wronger and wronger, and the left still doesn't get it. So I'm not going to concede, like the left wants us to, that all religion is bad, even though we have such terrible experiences with it ourselves. That's what I said at the beginning. We've got to reclaim, reestablish what faith means and take it to the public in these next few months. That's what I think.
So I'm a social studies educator in West Virginia, and that
Tough
means
state.
yes, and that means my context is most of my kids come from very faithful families who call themselves Republican.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of hope in my classroom because the actual conversations I have with these kids about history and civics, they're little socialists and they don't know it because that's not what they've been told. So how can we use that tool of our kids who are very faithful and very progressive and intercept them from that leaning of the right that they'll get as they get older in order to encourage them to help with this process?
That's so good. That's so good. Let me tell you a similar story. I'm a Little League baseball coach, 22 seasons. Both my boys, Jack is here somewhere. And I would talk to my players when they were 12 years old, Little League, about, do you know, guys, I got the permission of the black players first. Guys, you know what your black teammates, you know they've all had a talk with their dad or their mom about how to behave and not to behave in the presence of police. You know all your black teammates and classmates have had that talk? And then the players would say, yeah, here's what my dad said. And all the stuff about, if our white kids hear the truth, they're going to feel guilty and responsible for slavery. It's going to hurt their self-esteem. I never had that experience. My white players got pissed when they heard about what's happening to their black players, and some of them got involved in racial justice stuff and still are in college and afterwards. Young people have to be told the truth, and then you've got to trust what happened to lots of us. We heard a lot of untruth growing up in our churches, and someone said, no, this is wrong. You know, when I was a teenage kid in the evangelical church, I heard this stuff, and I got pissed. And I went, and I've been secular for a long time, found my way back to faith, but you got to trust our kids. Tell them the truth. Trust their instincts. And the other thing that comes from that question is, what changes people most of all is not just reading and studying, but proximity. Proximity. And those young people have got proximity. When 9/11 happened and the coverage came out, and my son Luke, who was 12, we were watching the news. He said, Dad, look what they're saying about Muslims. That's not true of Muhammad. What are they talking about? It's going to be proximity that changes people's minds, you know. And Christians, I was in Omaha flying in, and this guy next to me was clearly a business guy, and we got talking, and he voted for Trump. And I said, do you want to deport the Dreamers, those young people who are still here? But he says, oh, no, those are great kids. My kids know those kids in school. They're great kids. I don't want to deport them. Well, Trump wants to deport them. Well, he's wrong about that because he has proximity to young DACA Dreamer kids. It's going to be proximity that I got lost. I get lost a lot. I was lost driving around here the other night, looking at all these houses and their flags. And I was wondering what I could say to those people if I walked up to the front door or we were in a meeting somewhere. But what most of them don't have is any proximity to the people they're afraid of. They have no proximity. So there's not bonding conversations between the moms and dads about our kids' hopes and dreams and health and future. It's not happening because they're not in proximity to people they're afraid of. Our job in the faith community is to maximize proximity in this country so people see and hear the stories of others and say, no, I don't think they're what they say. This quick story. Jim Simpson, my executive director of the center, his father and mother are Scottish, starting a new church in Georgia, and Dad is the pastor, Scottish. She was in the choir, and one Sunday morning, they always practice before church, and the choir director prays. She's not a right-wing militant person. She's just a choir director who was afraid, and she prayed, Lord, save us from those cartels of immigrants that are coming with their disease and their guns and their rapists. Save us and protect the soldiers. And the wife of the pastor stopped the prayer and says, no, that's not true. We don't lie in church. I know why you're afraid. We can have that conversation, but that's not true, and we shouldn't lie in church. That's what I mean. Anybody, we have influence. Take it to where you have influence and use your authority in relationship to say, no, we don't lie in church.
That's actually a great segue into my question, which is, so I was raised in the evangelical church, became a Christian at an altar call as a teenager, there for the duration. And then in the last 5 years, well, progressively, I've been saying things probably considered a little bit of a fly in the ointment and questioning, and that was Tracy, and that's what she does. And then 3 years ago, I got a divorce, and it's been a lot easier to pull out of those black and white militant communities because my identity has shifted. And so that's changed the validity of what I can say. And so I hear what you're saying, and I want to have influence, and I know on some level re-engaging with those communities would probably be the right thing to do, but I'd love a little bit of encouragement because I'm exhausted.
Well, we all need that. Kristen Dumais, I mentioned her before, wrote the book Jesus and John Wayne, which speaks to the depths and history of all of that. So read the book. But what I do a lecture to my students just before Thanksgiving every fall. It's how to get through Thanksgiving dinner with uncle, crazy uncle, and your father and whoever. And I say, you can't start by saying, you're wrong and I'm right. I know you're paying for my school, but you're wrong and I'm right. You got to say, most parents care about their kids and what they're thinking. Here's how I'm changing. I was raised with this. In fact, we have some, there are people of faith, common ground, my common ground, yours, but what that means to me is changing. Thomas Merton says, everything depends on relationships. And it does. Everything is about relationships. So we're not going to always win. And in fact, we're going to be hurt again and again by people who shut us out for being who we are, or being divorced, or being gay, or being young, or being black. All that's true. But the only foundation we have is the relationship we have with people. And I think there's going to be more openness and listening from women than from men, because women are better at valuing relationships. So it's very tough, but I think we've got to give it our best shot. What I don't want us to do is just feel right all the time and say how wrong the other people are and watch the country go into this whole new history in America. At the Justice Department this week, in a celebration of the Civil Rights Act, I saw not just how we're doing and not doing, I saw a whole Justice Department believing the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is about to be virtually repealed. 60 years of history about to be repealed. That's what we're facing. In the midst of that, let's take the risk, and we're not going to win every conversation, but let's make sure people have to listen to us because they're in relationship to us, and that means they have to listen one way or the other. This is the time not to be silent and keep politics off the table. Put it right on the table, but in terms of faith, I think. Does that help? Yeah, thanks. I'm looking at time here.
Just one comment about demographics. When the people that were running some climate change, they found that the group that moves America is suburban white women. You have to move them to change issues. And they have never been able to sell that group that climate change is important to their children. And so I think that's one thing. And the other thing I wanted to ask you is, how have the Jewish peoples, how has Trump won them over, and where is that issue now, and where do you think the fault lines in that are?
Yeah, you heard the last speaker here. Trump has not won over the Jewish people. That's not true. That's not true. We have a terrible, horrendous problem in Gaza. It's become Joe Biden's Vietnam. And that's horrendous, and that's a factor in how we might lose the election. But Trump has not won over the Jews. All this talk about white women in the suburbs, some of that's true. Black women are going to be the ones who save us in this country and save the election. And we need to be in deep alliance with black women everywhere. And they're not turning to Trump. Black women are not turning to Trump. Some black men are, some Hispanic men are, black women aren't. And they're going to be the core in this campaign. So link in black churches, black women run the place. And so how do we ally with ourselves with our allies in the black community, and I would say black women in particular. I see that sign, and when I talked to Ken and Beverly about this book a long time ago, Ken said, I want to write a song. And whenever I'm with him, he always sings what I say in a better way than I can say it. So Ken, sing this song for us as I close.
You heard this yesterday, and you're going to hear it again. Can you hear me all right? The mic level seems to be down, but... I want to see a faith that sounds and smells like welcome, where people meet beyond the walls of race and clan and creed. I want to see a faith where mercy grows like gardens, hope and health meet hand in hand, and loving takes the lead. I want to see a faith come alive in every culture, speaking peace in every language, hope in every tongue. Alive with conversation, communion and connection. Words of love are spoken here, and songs of love are sung. I want to see the real thing. I want to see the big deal. I want to see the God life that can can turn a soul around. I want to feel the Spirit. I want to hear the music. I want to know the God power that can break those barriers down. I don't want to see another institution worshiping white Christian nationalism with pretty songs to sing. What I want to see is a love-born revolution. What I want to see is the real thing. I want to see a faith that helps me find that Jesus way. Put my feet on that narrow road he spoke of long ago. I want to see a faith where people lift each other up to make the choices and the changes that will help our spirits grow. I want to see a faith where everybody matters. Everyone, no matter who, has special gifts to give. I want to see a faith to help me find my place of service. We give, receive, belong, believe, and that is how we live. I want to see the real thing. I want to see the big deal. I want to see the God life that can turn the soul around. I want to feel the Spirit. I want to hear the music. I want to know the God power that can break those barriers down. I don't want to see another institution worshiping white Christian nationalism with pretty, pretty songs to sing. What I want to see is a love-born revolution. What I want to see is the real thing. I want to see a faith. Neighbor cares for neighbor, caring for that image of God that's alive in everyone. Oh, that's scary as hell. I want to see a faith where no one needs to go without. No matter what compassion costs, we race to get it done. I want to see a faith that dares to speak with honesty. No compromise, no clever lies, no dumbing down. I want to see a faith that will tell the truth to everyone. The rich, the poor, the high, the low, the criminal, and the crown. I want to see the real thing. I want to see the big deal. I want to know the God life that can turn a soul around. I want to feel the Spirit. I want to hear the music. I want to know the God power that can bring the barriers down. I don't want to see another institution worshiping white Christian nationalism with pretty songs to sing. What I want to see is a love-born revolution. What I want to see is the real thing. Yeah, I want to feel the Spirit. I want to hear the music, want to know the truth. I want to tell the truth. I want to know about it. I want to learn about it. I want to shout about it. I want to sing about it. I want to be about it. I want to know the God power that can turn the soul around, break the barriers down. I want to feel it, hear it, see it, know it. Don't you know I want to see the real thing.
Thank you for listening to us today. Thank you very much. Thank you.